Hello, everyone, and thank you for attending this Input ACE training webinar. Today, we're going to be doing something a little bit different. We've had a series of webinars over the course of the past several months that have all gone into detail on specific forensic video analysis techniques. And today, instead, we're going to focus specifically on the Input ACE UI, the user interface within the program. Primarily taking a focus on the new features that were released this week in version 2.2.0. So that said, I'm going to dive directly into this webinar, and we're going to take a look at how to effectively use the Input ACE narrative report to take your evidence, all of your exhibits, your marked images, your subclips, and any video that is relevant to a case, and look at techniques to put that together into a package that can be delivered over to a prosecutor or another investigator within a simple PDF package. So here what we have on the Input ACE screen is a sample of a typical Input ACE project. So here we have a group with a series of items. We have another group with a series of items, and each of these are organized in a way that allow me as the user to snap back and forth between them with ease. So already a decent amount of work has been put into this particular project so that now I can simply click on a marked image and it will snap me right back to that particular frame of video. So if I want to go through and navigate between this particular case, I can see any relevant areas that have already been tagged. So I'm going to move forward with the assumption that most of you are familiar with how to perform these types of actions, how to mark images with your M key, how to drag in various proprietary video files and play them back. But if you have not yet been exposed to those basic interactions within the program, I highly recommend that you take a look at some of the other webinars that are already online. I'll show you towards the end of the webinar where all of those are located. And if you want to get a quick start as well with this, if you're using the Input ACE application, you can come up to the Help menu under the User Manual and take a quick look through the Quick Start Guide there, which will help you get started with these basic interactions. So assuming that you are already familiar with those basic items, let's take a look at how we can now take marked images and subclips, which of course are the smaller durations of a video between an in and out mark on a timeline, and then put them together with a narrative report by toggling over to the Tools page under Narrative Report. So if you have not yet come over to this location within the program, you'll find that it is organized in a very similar way to other standard word processing engines. However, there are some specific things that are unique to Input ACE that provide a lot of additional flexibility and power to a typical video workflow. So here we see this particular project already contained together within an Input ACE narrative report with a title page outlining the title of the report, the style of report, who it's going to, and that kind of thing. And as we go down through this report, we can see a table of contents that's already been built. And we come down and see an introduction with a brief text-based introduction to this particular case, a summary section articulating a brief introduction to some of the nuances of the video, the exhibits, technical considerations, and then ultimately we come down into really the meat and potatoes of this report, which is in the analysis section. So if you're writing something like a forensic video analysis report, this layout is something that is pretty standardized. We have typical headings that are going to be reused on every single case, but the actual video may be a little bit different, right? In this case, we've got area identifying the victim, and then with an arrow enlarging that area so we can see what that looks like in the background in a bit more detail. We're then tracking the victim's actions through the video, and all of that was done initially by going through and marking these images. So I'm going to show you what this looks like when it's built from scratch, but I wanted to start by showing you what a final report can look like. Here we have the suspects now arriving in their vehicle, entering the building, and we can now track these two individuals as they enter the building, including video that has been added by simply dragging and dropping over any of these subclips directly into the narrative report. And now what I'm going to do here is show you what happens when we take all of these items and we finally generate the report. So if you come up to the Generate PDF button up here at the top right-hand corner of the program, when I click that button, I can now save this PDF anywhere that I want on my computer. And in this case, I'm going to use my little outputs folder here. I'm going to call this my example report. What Input Ace is doing right now is taking every single image, every single clip of video, and wrapping that up into a single PDF file. So you saw how quick that was there. And when I launch and open this up, this is opening a single PDF file. And here we see the title page designed just as it appeared within Input Ace. We have our table of contents that is actually hyperlinked already, so we can click on any of these items and it will snap me right to that particular location. So if I come up here and I want to see my exhibits area, I simply single click that and it will snap me right to that section of the report. And when I get down into the analysis section and we look at any of the images that were added to the report, the big benefit here is that anybody with a PDF reader who is reading this one single PDF file can click on any of the images and it will launch and open the original bitmap image that was originally marked within Input Ace. So now instead of needing to send all of these small exhibits, especially because they initially started as proprietary video that can't be played in standard players, Input Ace has taken all of those and embedded them as raw, uncompressed images in the report. And even when we come down to the section that includes video, we can click on those video links and it will launch open and play the video in whatever standard player the user has on their computer, which in this case on my computer is using simply Windows Media Player to launch open and play that file. So for those of you who are familiar with Input Ace, you might notice that this side-by-side view was also built within the program using the Canvas editor node to take those multiple sources of video and combine them together. So this entire report from beginning to end was all built within the Input Ace program using a number of various features of the program, primarily marking images and adding text, making subclips and adding text, combining those things together within the Canvas editor, and then ultimately dragging and dropping all of those items directly into the narrative report to put together this clean design that we're seeing here. So I'm going to now go back to the beginning here and let's start this from scratch and really get a better understanding of how a full thorough project can get built and how those items can get added into the report to ultimately output a single PDF file, which again can be transferred onto a thumb drive or via Dropbox or even emailed if the report is small enough. And as long as the viewer has that one single file and a standard PDF reader, they will see everything that we just went through within that quick example. Okay, I'm going to delete this PDF. I'm going to shut down Input Ace and relaunch just so we can clean everything out. We've removed all the items out of the file list. We've cleaned out the narrative report. And we now have a new instance of the program running that we can go back through and see an empty file list. I want to toggle over to the tools page and launch the narrative report. What you'll see is a clean, empty report that does not yet have anything within it. So starting from here, I'm going to move over a new window here, and let's see what happens when we start by looking at a brand new case with 3.drv video files. By dragging and dropping those items directly into the file list, we automatically see a group appear, here titled Group 1 by default, and 3.drv files within that group. Just like before, I can interrogate those files by clicking on the play button. And when I play back that item, we see a timeline, we see a number of various hotkeys, all of the metadata that might be necessary for us within the clip. But I'm going to gloss over most of those items and really just jump into the primary practical use case of a file like this. In this particular case, we see a vehicle appear within the parking lot here, and I'm going to just hold down my arrow keys now to go forward in a bit more of a fast forward way. And we see two suspects exit the vehicle. And the primary suspect here, the female wearing the shorts and the dark colored shirt with that object in her left hand, this primary suspect will enter the building. And I go forward here and fast forward. We'll see that in just a few more seconds, that ultimately the two of them will enter the building and exit that camera view. Once they exit the camera view, they're going to appear onto the second camera inside of the building. So this doorway here is the same doorway that we saw them enter into. And so if I scrub forward in the timeline here, eventually we will see them enter the building right here and walk towards the back. So I'm just going frame by frame forward with my arrow keys as we see those two individuals walk towards the back area of this building. Then they appear on this third camera view in the back and ultimately assault the woman here who is playing games at one of these machines. So with that basic layout, we've got 3 different camera views. We see the suspects enter on camera 1, then enter the building on camera 2, then they come into the back area onto camera 3, which we're going to see here as I go forward frame by frame in just a moment here. And as I continue to go forward frame by frame, we'll see them enter in from below on this area of the camera. And then the frame right here depicts some liquid being splashed onto the victim. And then just a couple frames later, we see our primary suspect enter the view, move her hand towards the victim, and then ultimately the flames now ignite as the whole area erupts in flame, engulfing both the victim and some of the areas in the background. So with those small key pieces of evidence, what I'm going to do now is put together a more thorough input ACE project by marking a couple of key frames, by making some subclips that span the duration of those events, and then let's see what we can do within the narrative report to put that together in a package that we can quickly disclose over to anyone that might need to see this evidence. So what I like to do when I start a project is come up to the groups and name the groups with something that makes sense. So instead of leaving the default name here of group 1, I'm going to type in something like media evidence or video evidence. Then I'm going to go through and I might begin to mark images and subclips that are relevant. So here we had the vehicle come into view. And if I want to find that area, I can click on my fast forward item a number of times to fast forward quite quickly through the video. And now as we're scanning forward, we can see just how quickly that moved forward until we saw that vehicle pop into view. I can then hold my left arrow key to go backward in time. So I'm just rewinding the video up until before the vehicle enters. And what I'm going to do now is begin to make my first subclip of video, which is just a small section of video when those suspects arrive on this camera view. To start my subclip, I'm going to mark an in mark with my I key, just by striking the I key on my keyboard. And we can see this blue notifier along the left-hand side of the video, signifying that I've marked an in. And within the timeline now, we see a little tick appear along the timeline showing me that that's the location where that in mark appears. I'm going to continue going forward in fairly fast forward motion by using my right arrow on the keyboard. And again, I could go significantly faster by striking the fast forward keys a number of times to go forward more quickly in time. So we're going to roll this back again with my left arrow. We watch them go into the building. And now they're inside of the building. I'm going to end my clip by marking my O key to create an out mark. So here we see now the span of video that we've segmented by marking an in and marking an out. And what I'm going to do now is create a subclip, which is going to be a new item in the file list that will appear as its own item that contains just the video from within this range of time. To create a subclip, I simply need to strike my S key on my keyboard to create the subclip. And here I can give that subclip a name. In this case, I'll call this suspects enter parking lot. And I could, if I choose to, apply some narrative report text here. I'm going to leave this field blank for now, but later on in the webinar, we're going to come back and we're going to use this narrative report text to apply some additional narrative descriptions of what's occurring on the video within that particular range of time. So by leaving this as a default, simply typing in the name and pressing OK, we'll see that we have a new subclip item appear here within my file list. So the next thing that happens here is going to be on camera 2 when they enter the building. So I'm going to now go back to that area that we had found them entering the building. Again, holding down my right arrow key to go forward, fast forward in time. And I'm going to do the same process here. I'm going to mark an in before they come into view. I'm going to play through the area where they're walking to the back of the building, then mark an out once they've exited camera view, strike my S key, and make a new subclip. And here I'll call this suspects in building, again leaving everything else default. Now I could choose at this time, if I wanted to put those items into a new group. So by default, input ACE is pre-filling the group called Subclips, but I could type in any name that I wanted here. I could make a new group called, for example, suspect 1, or I could call it location 1, or I could name this anything that I might want. That way I can help to segment and separate out any items that might be related to suspect 1 from suspect 2. And when I press OK, it's going to create a new group, and that way I can really keep track of things in chronological order and separate those from other items. Now in this case, I'm actually going to put these all into one basic group, so I'm going to just move this item back into the subclips group just by simply dragging and dropping that into the other group. I'm going to delete this suspect 1 group just to kind of keep things cleaned up. But I wanted to make sure that people are aware of how they can create different groups and to name those groups so that when you save a project and want to reload those exhibits, we can help keep track of what's occurring. Because as I'm sure most of you have experienced, you may be working on a particular case and then something more important comes up, or you may go on vacation and you might come back 2 weeks later and want to pick up that work. And it's really helpful to have saved all of this so we can reload these items and continue moving forward right from where we left off. Okay, so now that we have these 2 subclips created, I'm going to toggle over to this rear camera here, camera 3, moving forward to the area where we see the victim ultimately have the liquid get splashed onto her face. And I'm going to go back in time, mark my in, play forward through the events here so we can see exactly what's occurring on any of the relevant frames when both the victim and the suspect are on view. I'm going to end that subclip, and I'll just call this the moment of assault. Okay, so we now have the suspect entering into the building, but they're going to now leave the building along the same direction. So the next time that we're going to see them is going to be on camera 2, and we can see in our timeline that we still have the in and out marked here within the timeline. So we could use this to snap right back to the last moment by snapping to the out mark using the one of the hotkeys to snap to the out mark. And now I can go frame by frame forward from that point in time to get very quickly to the relevant area on this camera as they begin to leave the building. So I'm going to mark an in with my I key. Again, playing frame by frame forward, we can see the victim and the suspect here engaged with one another, both engulfed in flames. And then as they leave the building now, here's the victim now getting up and ultimately exiting the building. I can end my clip with my out mark, make that subclip, and I'll call this the suspect exits building. And then now our last clip is going to be on camera 1 as they leave the parking lot. So again, I'm going to snap back to my out mark, move forward in fast forward motion by holding down my right arrow key. And then as the individuals begin to exit the building, I'm going to start my in mark, playing through these events. We can see the suspect now getting into the vehicle while the victim is still engulfed here in flames. And I'm going to continue playing forward here as the truck now exits the parking lot and is out of view. Okay, so I've ended my final out mark, striking my last S key to create this last subclip, and I'm going to name this subclip here, Suspects Exit Parking Lot. So starting from just this point in time, we now have 5 different subclips containing any of the relevant footage of those individuals entering and then ultimately exiting again the building. But I'm going to strike now a marked image of the best image that I can find of my suspect as she enters the building. So when we saw her entering the building on this camera view here, I'm going to just zoom in with my mouse wheel. Right around in here are probably the best images that we have of her face and the clothing that she's wearing, including the view of the object that she's holding in her left hand. So for this frame right here, I'm going to mark this image with my M key on my keyboard. And just like a subclip, a marked image can be named. So in this case, I'm going to call this one here the best image of the suspect. And I could, if I choose to, apply some narrative report text. And in this case, I'm going to include that narrative report text just so that we can see what happens with this once we get into the narrative report area of the program. So I'm going to simply describe this something like on camera 2 at 11:27.143 running time. And I'm getting that time, of course, from the area of the timeline over in this region that's reporting the running time. I'll say primary suspect enters building, carrying object in her left hand. So I could apply significantly more details if I choose to here, but I'm going to stop here just to show you what this ends up doing on the narrative report tab when we add this item to the narrative report. Okay, so now what we have here is a group containing subclips, a group containing our single marked image, our group containing our media evidence, and I'm going to save this project now just in case I need to reload this at another point in time in the future. So to save the project, I'm going to come up with my mouse here to the Project Actions dropdown, and we can currently see that the project is in an untitled state. And by coming to the Project Actions dropdown and choosing Save, I can save this project with a name. And in this case, I'm going to call it something like assault.project. So now if I ever want to reload this project, I can simply launch Input ACE, come back up to Project Actions and choose Load, and it will rebuild all of these exhibits, all of the video, all of the subclips, all of the marked images. And now when I toggle over to my Tools page under the narrative report, what we'll see here is a blank report with no title page. It's just simply an empty report. And I'm going to now walk through the old versions of the Input ACE program, how they used to work, and then I'm going to then move forward and show you how we can leverage some of the new features in the latest version of the program to get to a final result much more quickly. So here someone might want to build a typical report by coming into here, centering the report, maybe changing the font size to something larger, giving this report a title. I'm just going to type in right now report title as just a placeholder so we can see what it might look like. Maybe we want to add in the author name, perhaps the agency information, perhaps the date. Any other relevant information might be included here within the title page of the report. So this may not look clean and well designed. We'll come back and we'll make this look better, but I want to just use this as a placeholder so that we can get to the final version of processing the report out. So now on this second page, what I might want to do is create a heading to talk through any observations that I have. So to create a heading, I can come up to the button right here and choose a heading, and I can then create a section title for this area of the report. And in this case, I might choose something like observations. Within my observations section now, I can begin to drag in any of the items that I want, any of these subclips, directly into the report. So if I drag in, for example, this one subclip, we'll see here that it brings in the video of the suspects entering the parking lot with the play button over top of the video. And I can continue to do this one at a time. And again, I'll show you a better way here in a moment to begin to expand on the items within this report. Now, we could drag them all in at once, but I'm going to build this one at a time to show you what that looks like before we get into the methods to put all this together into a quicker report. So now that we have these three different items in, perhaps I want to add a new page. So I can come up and press the Add Page button, which bumps down this image, and I'll drag that back up. For those of you who are on the beta version of the program, you may be experienced with the fact that the Add Page button will now create a brand new page without bumping any of the items down. It's one of the new features that's set to be released in a couple of weeks. And anyone who's on the beta version can get a chance to play with that. And if you would like to get access to the beta version, to see all of the new features before they get released, please do send us an email at any point in time and make that request. We'd be happy to get you the forms to get you up and on the beta. There are some really exciting new features that are coming out here within a couple of weeks, so the more people that can get a chance to experience that ahead of time would be great. Okay, so I'm going to add these final two items by selecting them both at the same time and dragging them in. And now we can see here that we have a number of subclips that have gone through clip by clip by clip. If we want to, at this point in time, we could begin to add some text boxes by dragging and dropping a text box and then typing in some of the information that we might want. So we could say suspects enter parking lot in a truck, maybe perhaps with more information if we choose to. But we can see now how we can add text beside these images to more thoroughly explain what's occurring on the video. What I'm going to do here now, though, to end this item, I'm just going to add some additional lines here and then bump these items back up. I'm going to add one final heading right here, and I'm going to name this image of suspect. And here I'm going to now drag in that item that we had, which was the image of the suspect that we had marked previously. And if you recall, when I marked that item, I also added some narrative report text within that field on the marked image. So not only did I name that item, but I also applied that brief narrative description of what's occurring on that image. And if I drag that item into my report, we'll notice that a text box appears directly beside the image with that narrative report text. And that item is going to be grouped together with the image. So as I move this around, that text box will stay linked with the image. And I'm going to come back to this and show how we can leverage all these features in more detail. But what I'm going to do right now is actually delete out this narrative report text just so that we can see this in a bit more of a clean interaction when I finally generate the PDF. So what I might do now is take this item, I might copy and paste it into a new instance of that item. And the reason that I'm doing this right now is that I can have two items side by side. But on this second item, I'm actually going to come in here with a right click and edit the image to crop out the area of the suspect so that I can enlarge just that area and really highlight specifically what that suspect looks like when we generate the PDF and want to include a bit of a highlight showing that area. And to end here, I'm going to add a quick rectangle over our suspect, maybe drawing an arrow from the suspect over to the enlarged view so we can get a better idea of what this all looks like. So in a matter of a few minutes now, we've started with a blank report. We've added a quick title page. We've added a couple of little headings talking through the exhibits, and then an image of the suspect here at the end. So for those of you who have been using past versions of the program, this was all doable, all with significant ease. And when we're ready to put this together into a PDF, we'll come up here and press the Generate PDF button. We can then name this PDF, which I'll call Assault Example. And as the PDF is generating, it's taking all of those subclips that we added to the PDF or to the report. It's taking the marked image that we added to the report, and it's embedding them directly into the PDF. So just like we had shown on that more thorough example, we were able to take from the very beginning these original .drv files, expand those into subclips, create marked images, organizing that all in a report. And we've now built this assault example.pdf file that can be launched on anyone's computer. We can see the title page. We can see the subclips. When anyone clicks on one of those subclips, it will launch open and play that single exhibit on their computer. So they can watch now as the suspects enter the parking lot. And they can even go through and look at the area of the best image of the suspect to click on either one of these items, and it will launch open and play the original bitmap image on their computer. So this is exactly the same thing that we had done previously, but we can see now how that's being built kind of step by step by step. But in the latest version of Input ACE, there is a new feature that provides us with a bit of a better way to getting to this end result. So I'm going to delete out all these items. I'm just going to use Control A to delete out everything. I'm going to snap back to a beginning where we have a single title page that's blank. So we've now, instead of building this piece by piece by piece, we're going to leverage the brand new narrative report templates to more effectively get to that end result without needing to build it all from scratch every single time. To use the narrative report templates, come up to the File dropdown and choose Load Template. And from here, you will see on the current release that we have pre-shipped 4 different example templates with your version of Input ACE. Now, keep in mind, you can make your own templates from scratch, but I'm going to go through and show you each of these 4 different examples right now so we can see the types of templates that we've created for you that you can load by simply selecting them and pressing open. So here's an example of what one kind of bolo template could work. And you'll notice that the information that's loaded in here is just some default template information. So this is containing a basic sheriff's logo with some basic information. And you can tell, obviously, that this is 123 Main Street in Anywhere, Washington. All of this can be changed within your version of the program. And I just had a question come in asking if this is on the beta version or if this is what you have in the release. And all of the features that we're showing you today are in the released version of the program. So everything that we're seeing within this instance of Input ACE is in version 2.2.0. that is released to all users of the program. So here's a bolo example, just to give you an idea of how we might build these. And you can change these examples here by adding in your own logos and changing out the text and then saving those so that when you're ready to use, for example, a bolo report, you can come up and load your personal template that might have your agency's logo in it, your agency's information, potentially your information as the author of the report. And then the only thing that you have to do to get this bolo out the door is drag in any of the items that are relevant, maybe crop and organize them, add a description, generate the PDF, and you're done. And we'll do that here in just a moment. Before I get there, though, let's take a look at some of the other templates that are included by coming back to the File Load Template area. And let's take a look at what a FVA template report might look like. So this is a Forensic Video Analysis Reports template. And this is the same template that was used in the beginning of this webinar when we walked through what the final report template looked like on this particular PDF. So you might see that this template looks rather familiar with a table of contents and an introduction and a summary section. And all of those items, I'm going to close out of this PDF here, were done by preloading the FVA template, which has the title of the case, the title of the report, any naming that we might have here. And then as we go through to a table of contents down below, we can see the current table of contents that we have. And as we go further, we can see the introduction section. And in this case, the template just basically defines what an introduction section would typically include. So the expectation, of course, is that you on your particular case are going to come down into here and are going to change out the text, leaving the heading for the introduction, but changing out the text that corresponds directly to your specific case. Here in the qualification section, you would include something like your CV or any other relevant experience that you have personally to be writing the report. Any equipment that you've used can be listed in this area. Your analysis, again, just to get yourself started, the headings will help you to navigate through what a typical report could look like. And all of these items here, when we change out the headings, are feeding back to the table of contents here. So this is a dynamically updating table of contents that is looking to the page numbers of where those different items are. And if you want to update these, you can come in and right-click in the table of contents and choose Update Table. So just as a quick example of that, let's say for your specific needs, you don't want to use an introduction. You might want to use an executive summary. Oops, let me undo that real quick with my undo key. I'm going to delete out the introduction text here and type in something like executive summary. Now that I've changed that particular heading, when I come up to my table of contents, that area does not yet update until we right-click and choose Update Table. And it will automatically update the headings that are being used in the report, and it will keep the page numbers where those headings begin. And when we generate the PDF report, these items will automatically hyperlink to those areas. So if I were to generate the report as it looks right now, as an example, and I'll just call this a FVA example, it will embed all of those items, it will take all of those items that are currently in the report, which is almost nothing. It just has the basic title page and the table of contents. But now when the viewer wants to click on the qualification section, it will snap automatically to that section. And all of that is done automatically within that FVA template report that you can preload again by going to the File, Load Template area within the narrative report. Let's take a look at the other two example templates. Here's one for a missing persons report. So we can see another quick example with a duplicate logo at the top with a big bolded section showing a missing person. Again, the expectation is that you would begin to mark any areas that are relevant, potentially dragging in things like images from Facebook directly into the file list, preload the missing persons template, and then swap out the images. And keep in mind that this doesn't have to be a missing persons template. We can come into the text up in here and change this out to be something else if we wanted to make this be a bolo for anything else. We can type in additional text for be on the lookout or aggravated assault or whatever it might be for your specific needs. These templates are just giving you designs that can be reused for your specific needs. Back on here on the load template area, let's load the one final example template that's being shipped within version 2.2.0. And this final template is another person of interest example where we have simply a marked image enlarging that area with an arrow, and then a video hyperlink that would be intended to be used to attach a video. So what I'm going to use is this particular template to redo my particular case in a much faster way. And to start this off, I'm actually going to swap out the layout of this with a real agency's logo so that we can look at what this could be done on your end when you begin to get back and play with these templates yourself. So Detroit Police Department, one of our customers, was kind enough to send me their logo to use within this webinar. And I'm going to drag in their logo now directly into the file list by simply taking that JPEG image and dragging that into the file list. And then what I'm going to do here is add a little bit of extra space just by making a couple of return items here. Oops, let me go back and undo this here by loading that template up. Because what I want to do here is, instead of bumping around the areas, I want to just simply drag in that Detroit image. I'm going to come up and delete out the logo that's being currently used, move Detroit's logo up to the top. And then what I can do here is change out any of the text that I might want. So if I'm going to swap out the address with the actual address for Detroit, I'll simply come in here and highlight that area, and I'll type in something for their address, which in this case should be 1301 3rd Ave in Detroit, Michigan. I can then apply their number, which I'm not going to do in this case. I'll leave that blank. We could then change out the information for the individual here. So I'm going to just simply type in my name, which is Certified Forensic Video Analyst Andrew Fredericks. I could then use our email address here, which I'm going to use as info@inputace.com. And then there we have it. We have a new section title. I'm going to delete out the little line. I don't want that anymore. And now we have what would look like a new template for a person of interest. So now that I've got our new template for Detroit, I'm going to come out to our file. I'm going to save the template, and I'm going to give this a new name. And I'll call this the Detroit Person of Interest template. So now that I've saved this template, at any point in time in the future, when I want to reload this data, all I have to do is come up to the File, Load Template, and now that new Detroit Person of Interest template is now visible right here within Input Ace. And when I open that, we'll see it reload the template just as it looked where I left off. So when you're done watching this webinar, for those of you who have access to Input Ace, I highly recommend going through the 4 different examples that we have. Feel free to tweak them, adding your own logos, changing out with your own information, or if you feel so inclined, please start with a blank page and build your own template. So some of you may have specific agency layouts that are required for reports within your agency. And if you can build it in something like Word or Acrobat, you can rebuild it within Input Ace. And as soon as you've built it once, you can save that template and reuse it on any future case. Okay, so for this particular case here, I'm going to delete out our logo. We no longer need that item. We have our 5 different video clips. We have our 1 marked image. And what I'm going to do here before putting that together into a final report is take each of these different subclip items, and I'm going to combine them into one video file. That way I can replicate the look of this particular view here by taking each of those items and dragging them in as one video file. And you may have noticed that I actually deleted out the Detroit logo out of the file list here, and that removed the item from the report. So I'm going to go back and re-add that item back in. And I can actually do that by going to File, Load Template, and reloading the Detroit template. So just as a quick explanation, when you load a template, it does not need to have the items in the file list. But if an item is in the file list and you delete it, it will remove it from the report. So what I've done here basically is reloaded that template. It's brought the image back in, but it's out of the file list. If you have any questions about that, please don't hesitate to ask our support team. But essentially, you can think of the file list as containing any video or image or audio items. If you drag those items into the report and then delete that item out of the file list, it will remove the item from the report. Now that is a completely separate thing from a template, which can be loaded again from that file menu And a template does not need to have the image items in the file list. But because mine was, when I deleted it, it removed the item from the report. So I've just brought that back in by loading that template. Okay, so what I was saying is I'm going to take these 5 different subclips and I'm going to combine them into one video that plays through these items chronologically. So when I drag that into the report, the prosecutor or potentially the any other investigator or police officer that may want to watch this item can click on one video file and play through all of these items at once. So to do that, those of you who are experienced with Input ACE, you simply need to come over to the Workflow tab, choose the Concatenate node from the Advanced Processes dropdown. I can then connect any of the items that I want to concatenate together, in other words, put together into one video file. And then I can then send those out into a new file. Like in this case, I'm going to choose MP4, just going to make a quick demonstrative exhibit here. I'll give this item a name. I'll call this my tracking suspects MP4. And I'm also going to check this checkbox here that sends the outputs back to the file list. So now when I connect my concatenate node to my output to MP4 and then execute the workflow by clicking on the button down here, it's going to take these 5 items, process them into one clip, and when it's completed, it's automatically brought that item back into the file list. So now when I go back to my tools page under narrative report, I can rebuild this basic report by deleting out these items. I'm going to click on them here and choose delete. I'm going to drag in my image of the suspect. I can move this item around. I may not want the narrative report text that came in automatically with it, so I can delete that item out. And I'm going to then select this, and I basically just copied and pasted there, which was the hotkeys Control-C, Control-V to create a second instance of this image. And the reason that I've done that is so that I can put these 2 items side by side. I can then take this second item here and crop it to kind of mimic the layout of what the original template looked like. I can then enlarge this up to make it a little bit bigger. I could add an arrow if I wanted to show that this item came from right here. And then I can drag in my video clip directly into the report as well. And again, this video clip, if we recall, was the entire video of all 5 of these items combined together into one. Then I can simply now just change out the basic text. So I would change out the case number. So instead of it calling it homicide investigation, we may call this something like, assault, case number, whatever it happens to be. We can choose video of person of interest entering store. I'll leave that the same. We could change out the summary that might be needed here, but I'm not going to go through the time to spend on this. I'm going a little long right now, so I'm going to leave this text the same. It should be obvious that you can change out this text. So now that we have our new person of interest ready to go, I'm going to generate this PDF. I'll save this as my person of interest report, or bolo. And now that I've saved it, it's taking all those items, embedding them into the bolo, and we were able to get to this result very quickly by starting with proprietary items, dragging them in, making some subclips, marking an image, loading a template, and we're already done. We've created a PDF file that is a single page sent over to any individual that wants to read this. And, oh, excuse me, that's the wrong PDF. It should be this person of interest bolo. And here's our one-page, cleanly designed bolo. Again, these items are linked to the original image, and the video link is now linked to that sequence that we created by concatenating together those 5 different clips. So this is roughly a 2 or so minute long video as we see the truck enter the building or enter the parking lot. I'm going to scan forward here just so we can watch what happens as they enter the building. So by continuing to play through this whole sequence was initially that first subclip, but as they begin to enter the building, what we'll see here is that it's going to snap to and toggle to the second video. So we can watch the suspect enter the building, and as soon as they enter the building and that subclip ends, it'll snap over to the second camera view, and we can now watch them in one video file, enter the building, walk to the back area, snap over to camera 3, where we see them ultimately assault the woman here who's on the machines. And all of this is in a single video file that is launched directly out of the PDF. So it's a really easy way of getting all of the relevant items into a simple automated way of getting these PDFs out and keeping them consistent with any designs that your agency might have or that they may require. So by keeping things the same every single time, we can much more quickly get to final results when we're starting with proprietary digital video evidence. Okay, so I'm going to open this up to questions now. I hope that as I go through and show some additional items, we've got one final piece that I want to cover, but please, now is a good time to begin asking questions as I go through some of the specifics of how to use the narrative report tab. So if you have anything that's lingering on your mind, now is a good chance to begin asking those. So what I'm going to do while the questions begin to come in is show you how to effectively use some of the features on this narrative report tab that may be different from a typical word processing engine. So to start this out, I'm going to come in here and delete out everything just by using my Control-A to delete out all of the images and all the different clips. And then maybe even come in here and choose Project Actions, New, to bring in a new item. In fact, give me 1 second here. I'm going to not do this. Okay, let's do this here real quick. Project Actions, New, don't save changes. I've now wiped everything out. We have an empty file list, an empty page here. And what I'm going to do here to start this off is rebuild a couple of different marked images and subclips so we can look at how this is being done within the narrative report tab and any of the specific features that may be a little bit different from the way that something like Microsoft Word might handle the same thing. So to do this, I'm going to create a quick subclip, not necessarily one that is relevant for our needs here, but I've got a subclip now created. I'm going to name this clip of events, and I'll apply some narrative report text, just saying something like, this is an example of narrative report text. So here we have a name called clip of events with narrative report text associated with it. I'm going to create a second subclip by not changing my in and out mark, but just by striking my S key, and I'm going to name this one no narrative report text. And we can see that the narrative report text area is blank. So first off, if we ever wanted to change the narrative report text, we can open up the settings for that item, and we can add the new narrative report text under the description field here. So we'll notice that the name called no narrative report text has no description, but if I go to the one called clip of events where we added that description, that's all right here now within the settings of that item. And the reason that I wanted to highlight this here is that if we go back to our tools page under narrative report, when I drag in the item that has narrative report text, what we'll see is that item contains the image, of course, with the play button over it since this is a subclip, and it contains a text box that's right next to the video. That's different from the item that says no narrative report text that comes in with no item next to the video. So hopefully that's a way that you can help to think through how we can add tagged notes on an item to ensure that if we want to apply additional text, that can come in automatically with those items. So let's now mimic the same thing over here kind of manually. So this item is the same subclip, it's the same range of time, it just had no narrative report text with it. But I can recreate that same view by coming up and creating a text box, dragging over an area to create a text box, and typing in any text that I might want. So for example, this is an example of narrative report text. But there is a bit of a difference. I mean, first off, I haven't sized the text box exactly the same, which I can change by simply dragging that over. But one of the key differences with this right now is this item that has the subclip with the narrative report text. What you'll notice is that when we click on this and drag and move those items around, they're combined together in a group. So if I deselect that item and click back on the item, you'll notice that the image and the text box are both together as one single item. When I did that manually though, when I click on the image, it's just the image. And when I click on the text box, it's just the text box. So essentially what happens here is when you add in a subclip or a marked image that has narrative report text with it, it will automatically group those two items into one. Now what I can do on this item below here to mimic this same result is select both of the items. And I can do this by clicking on one of the items, holding down my Control key, and clicking on a second item. And now you'll notice that they're both selected. If I want to group them together to force them into a single group, we can come up to the Format Shapes area and choose Group. What's happened now is we've mimicked exactly the same thing that's occurring here, where those two items are in one group, and these two items are now also in the same group. If you ever wanted to undo that action, select the item that is in the group and choose Ungroup, and now we're back to how we were before, where we have just the one single item and the other single item. If you want to come in and edit an item to crop out an area that's relevant, so for example, I'm going to go back here to my Interrogate tab, and I'm going to mark an image of the suspect here. So I'm going to move forward in time. I'm going to mark that image. I'll just name this here object in hand, maybe applying some narrative report text, saying something like object in left hand. So now that I've got that marked image that has the object in hand, let me show you what happens when I create a second marked image that has no narrative report text. So these two different items now, if I go back to my tools page under narrative report, let me delete out the items that we've got on here right now. Just holding down my control key, I selected them all, and then choosing my delete key, I removed them from the report. And now when I drag in my marked image with the object in hand, of course, it comes in with the narrative report text associated with that. When I drag in the second image, it'll come in without narrative report text. And if I wanted to crop out that area or edit this image in any way, all I have to do is right-click on the image and choose Edit Image. And from here, I can crop, I can rotate, I can change the size of the image. I can really do anything that I might want to do to change out what the image looks like within the preview area. So to crop, I would simply click on the crop area. I can drag and move this crop region around, and then I can resize the region just to the area that I want to show. And then when I close out the edit image window, it will show us now we just have this one cropped region, and we could select it and resize the item up if we choose to. So that's how we can edit a single image. But if you recall, if I undo this with my Control-Z, 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 another area that we can undo is up here in the menu for those of you who don't like to use hotkeys. But if I wanted to edit the image that is over here, one of the common problems that individuals will encounter is that this item is actually in a group. So if I were to select the item with a single click, we actually are selecting the entire group. We're not just selecting the image in this group. So if you want to edit just the image in the group, here's the best technique to use. Remember that when you single click on any item, first it will select the group. Then if you single click on the item, it will select just the item within that group. So watch that again. I'm going to deselect everything by clicking over here. When I click on the group, I'm selecting the group. When I click again on one of those items, I just have the item selected. Now keep in mind that that item is still part of the group. So if I move this item around and then deselect and select it again, it's still part of the same group, but I was able to move that item by clicking a second time and moving the item around. The same thing can be done with any item that's part of a group. So if I select the group and then click on the text box, I can move the text box. Using that information now, if we wanted to edit this image, the best way to do that is to select the group, select the image, then right-click and edit the image. And now we can come in and do our cropping or resizing or whatever else we might want to do. And that's simply by understanding that when an item is in a group, if you want to edit just one of the items from within that group, don't edit the group by selecting the group. Click a second time to edit that one single item within the group. Okay, so that's one thing that is different from with Input Ace compared to something like Microsoft Word. And of course, we can always add new items to the group. So if for some reason I wanted to take this group that currently has these two items in it and also add this item, simply hold down Control, click the additional item, and then press the group button. And now all three of these items are part of the same group, and they'll be moved together. And when they deselect, they'll stay as part of the same group. Keeping in mind, of course, that if I want to move this one individual item, the only way to do that is to select the group, select the individual item, and then move. Okay, so with that information said, here's a couple of additional items. We've made the assumption with the Narrative Report tab that any shapes that you want to add to an image, for example, a rectangle highlighting the object in the hand. As soon as you add a shape over top of another image, we automatically add that shape to the group. So if I were to deselect that item right now and then select the group, you'll notice that that shape is part of the group. So if you wanted to move the shape to a new position, if we single click on the shape, really all we've done is selected the group. So oftentimes what I'll see people in the InputAce class doing is they want to move that shape. So right now everything's deselected. They'll come up and click on the shape, and then they'll try to drag the shape, and the whole thing moves. And that can be a frustrating experience for some. But if you understand how it's working, I think you'll find that it's a preferable way to interact with this. So the best way to do this is to click on it the first time to select the group, click on it a second time to select just that one item, and now we can move or resize the shape in any way that you might need. And that goes for the same with any shape that overlaps an image. So if you add an arrow dragging over from the text and it covers over top of the image, as soon as it's on top of the image, that item will also be added to the same group. So I'm going to now delete out all of this, and let's take a look at some additional items that are unique to InputAce that are not the same as Word. So let me delete out everything here. One of the additional items here, I'm going to go back and interrogate this marked image. By interrogating a marked image, what happens is InputAce snaps me back to that same frame. And I'm going to add in a third marked image here, and maybe even adding in a fourth. Now that I have 4 marked images, when I come back to my narrative report tool, let's see what happens when we begin to drag in multiple items. So if you drag in a single item, that item will appear wherever your mouse currently is when you release the mouse. If you drag in 2 items, by selecting an item and holding down Control and selecting a second item, when you drag those 2 items in, they will appear top and bottom like this. However, when you drag in multiple items, like for example, you drag in 4 items at once, you'll notice that a pop-up message will appear. And the pop-up message basically says that only 2 items can be added to a single page at a time. If you continue, what's going to happen is all 4 of these items are going to be pasted at the bottom of your document. And you can choose continue or cancel. If you choose continue, what will happen is that initial page will stay empty here, and these items will just simply get snapped starting at the bottom of the document all the way through. Now, the reason that we've done that is because of the following. Let's say that I want to delete out these 3 different images here, and I'm going to move this item with the subclip, or with the narrative report text rather, down to this region. If you had an item like this, and you were to drag in these 4 different items and drag them to an area right here, the only way that that would work is either, just like what happens when you drag in 2 items onto the report, it would snap them on top of the same page, which may be okay when we're talking about bringing in 2 items. But the problem is if you have hundreds of items in the file list and you want to drag them in all at once to automatically have InputAce add a number of pages for you to go through the document, that wouldn't really work if we kept that same interaction of adding 2 items onto the same page. You wouldn't want to have 100 items stacked on the same page. So instead, what we've decided here is that when you add in more than 2 items, you receive this prompt, and when you press continue, instead of pasting them into that area on right here on the second page, it's going to add a new page and snap those items and add them to the bottom of the document. So if you want to add a single image onto a random page, that's doable. If you want to add 2 pages, or 2 items, that's also doable. If you want to add more than that, it's going to automatically snap them to the bottom of the document. So just keep that in mind as you begin to interact with the file list in more detail. That's what's occurring within the narrative report. Okay, so I'm seeing some questions pouring in, so I'm going to begin answering those as we talk about some additional items. One of the questions was whether or not this webinar will be posted online, and absolutely, yes, it will be. It's being recorded right now, and within a couple of days, this will be up on our YouTube channel. Another item that is being asked is about how the items are being embedded into the report. So the images that are marked images are embedded as uncompressed bitmaps directly in the PDF. So you can think of it as the PDF containing those bitmaps. The other items, like the subclips or the videos, those are being transcoded to MP4 in a visually lossless way. So there is some compression. If you refer back to the webinar that was discussing the difference between lossless and visually lossless and compressed, the items are in that visually lossless category. where mathematically speaking, there is compression, but it shouldn't be detectable heavily to the naked eye. And that's mostly because we needed to ensure that a viewer can view that data on their computer. So I recommend that if you're dealing with forensic issues and forensic items, make sure you keep a copy of the original evidence in that file list and potentially convert those items out of the program in a lossless way, because the reports are not intended to contain that lossless quality video data. It's just a proxy and a transcoded version of that to MP4. Okay, so another item that I'm seeing here, so how do you enter another line of text below an existing subclip? So if you wanted to add additional text to this item, here's the way to do that. Again, when I first click on this item, I'm selecting the group. When I click on the item again, I'm selecting the text box. And if I double click in that text box, I can now edit this text to add additional text. When I press my enter key, it will end up entering out of the text box. But you'll notice that that little example popped up that if you wanted to add additional lines, you can hold down the shift key and add more lines with the enter key. So a single strike of the enter key will end up exiting the box, but if you hold down shift and enter, it'll add new lines. You can click on that little message there to stop it from popping up all the time. I had another question come in about Control Z not undoing certain actions. And that was an item that should be resolved in version 2.2.0. So if you update the program to the latest version, you should see now that some of the additional items have the ability of undoing, like adding items from the file list or editing an image. Those now all should have the ability of undoing with Control Z. If you want to make adjustments to the image regarding things like contrast or brightness, the best method for that is to remember that you don't have to add marked images directly from the file list directly to the narrative report. You still have the entire power of the workflow tab to take these items and modify them in any way. So if you needed to, for example, rotate the image, or you wanted to resize the image, or you wanted to apply a levels adjustment to the image to brighten it, you can take that original marked image, you can, on the workflow tab, add a levels adjustment to change the brightness and contrast of the image to potentially highlight certain regions that may be important. And you can, even if you choose to, right from within here, use your crop node to crop out that area of interest. So you don't have to use the narrative report tab to do things like cropping and resizing. You can do them right from the workflow tab as well, and then send that item out to something like a bitmap image, where we can give this a name like my levels adjust and crop. And if I send this back to my file list, when I process this item out, it will add that item right back into my, my file list here with my levels adjustment and crop, so that when I go back to my tools under narrative report, I can add that levels adjustment and crop item directly into the report as well. So we don't have to use just the interactions within the edit image item, because again, this is kind of a limited interaction. It's just things like cropping and rotating and resizing. So you have the entire power of the workflow tab to do additional items that you might need. Okay, so a couple additional items that I want to cover here. Another new feature on the narrative report tab that is new in the latest version is the add page button. So when you add a new page to the report, it will simply add in a blank new page. That's one thing to keep in mind that should be very helpful as we move forward. For those of you who have the beta version, that add new page has another additional item with it. So we can chat about that offline. And again, for those of you who want to get access to the beta version, if you would like to get access to the latest features before they're released, please reach out to us at info@inputace.com. We'd love to get you access to the beta version. We just ask that you keep an open conversation back and forth with us as we continue to move forward with this. Okay, I've already gone over a little bit in time, so I apologize for everyone who had expected this to be an hour long. I'm going to end this webinar now. So if you have any additional questions that I am seeing some come in, we'll get back to you personally kind of one at a time, but I want to make sure that we don't go too long. As this webinar ends, you'll be prompted to fill out a survey through our webinar platform. Please, if you are able, just take the 1 minute or so to fill out that survey. It will be very helpful for us moving forward as we continue to develop Input ACE and to give you all the features that you need to expedite your workflows. Thank you, everyone. I hope this was helpful to learn how to use the new narrative report features within Input ACE, and I look forward to your feedback. Have a great day.